$340,000. That's what was left of my retirement account, my inheritance from our father, and 11 years of overtime shifts. Today I logged into my broker job and watched the balance read $412.63. Not stolen by a stranger, not drained by a hacker in some overseas server farm. Taken dollar by dollar, wire by wire, investment by investment by my own sister. The one my parents introduced at every holiday dinner as the smart one. The one with the Ivy League diploma on the wall and the manicured LinkedIn profile that said portfolio strategist under her name. She thought I'd never checked the paperwork. She thought I'd never learn what a wire transfer trace actually looks like. She thought that because I trusted her with my life savings, I'd trust her forever. She was wrong. This is a story of how I built a paper trail thick enough to put my own sister in front of a federal judge, and how I got every single dollar back, plus interest. They thought they got away with it. They were wrong. Hey, welcome back. If you're new here, this channel is dedicated to real financial betrayal stories, the scams, the fraud, the family members and trusted advisors who think they can take your money and disappear into their new life. Today's story is about greed, betrayal, and getting every single dollar back with the receipts to prove exactly how it happened. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe people who steal from the people who love them should face real consequences, hit subscribe now, because this channel exists to make sure these stories get told, in full, with every financial detail intact. Let's get into it. My name is Jordan. I'm not using my sister's real name in this video. I'll call her Vanessa because there's an active restitution order tied to this case, and I'm not interested in giving anyone a reason to slow that payment schedule down. But everything else, the numbers, the dates, the mechanics of how this happened, is exactly as it occurred. I need to set the stage because you have to understand the family dynamic before you understand how a fraud like this becomes possible. Vanessa is 3 years older than me. Growing up, she was valedictorian. She was captain of the debate team. She got a full ride to a business school most people only see on bumper stickers. I got decent grades and a state school scholarship, and I was fine with that. Genuinely fine. I loved my sister. I looked up to her. When she graduated and went straight into a boutique wealth management role at a firm I'd never heard of, nobody in my family blinked. Of course Vanessa was managing money. Vanessa managed everything. By the time I was 34, I was working as supply chain coordinator. Solid job. Not glamorous. $71,000 a year with decent benefits. I'd been putting money into a 401k since I was 24. My wife and I had a modest condo, no kids yet, and we were disciplined savers. When my father passed in early 2019, I inherited $186,000 from his life insurance policy and the sale of his half of a small rental property. That inheritance, combined with what I'd built in my retirement accounts and a taxable brokerage account, put my total investable assets at just under $310,000 by the start of 2021. That number matters. Remember it. $310,000 was a starting line. Here is how the trust got built, and I want to walk through this slowly. Because if you're watching this and you have a sibling or a family member who manages money professionally, I promise you will recognize pieces of this. Step 1. The credentials. Vanessa never lied about her job title. Not exactly. She really did work at a firm. She really did have a Series 65 license. I confirmed that much was true, later during the investigation. What she didn't have was authority from that firm to manage outside client funds through a side entity. But I didn't know that distinction existed. To me, my sister worked in finance. That was enough. Step 2. The small verifiable wins. In 2019, right after Dad passed, Vanessa told me she could put some of the inheritance to work in a diversified account she managed personally, separate from her firm, she said, because the fees were lower and she could be more hands-on with family. I gave her $20,000 as a test. Every quarter, I got a PDF statement formatted just like the ones I got from my actual 401k provider. Logos, disclosures, the whole thing. The account showed 9%, then 11%, and a rough quarter at 4%, which actually made it feel more legitimate, not less. Real markets have bad quarters. Fake ones usually don't. Step 3. The language. Vanessa never once said, "invest with me." She said things like, "I found an allocation strategy our firm doesn't offer retail clients, but I can get you into it through a special LP structure." She used real terms: limited partnership, accredited investor exemption, private placement memorandum, mixed with just enough vagueness that if I'd asked pointed questions, I would have felt embarrassed for not already understanding. Step 4. The family credibility loop. My mother trusted Vanessa completely. My aunt had money with her. A family friend from church had money with her. When I mentioned to my mother that I was thinking about moving more of my inheritance into Vanessa's fund, my mother said, "Honestly, I wish I had more to give her. She's done incredible things with Aunt Carol's money." That single sentence did more to lower my guard than any pitch that could have. Now let's talk about the red flags. Because looking back, they were there. They're always there. Red flag 1. Every account statement Vanessa sent me was a PDF, never a live portal login. I never once logged into a custodian website, no Charles Schwab, no Fidelity, no Interactive Brokers, to see my own account balance. I asked early on if I could get portal access just to check it whenever. She said the LP structure didn't allow individual investor logins, that everything ran through her as the managing member, and that was standard for this kind of vehicle. It is not standard. I know that now. Red flag 2. Returns were too consistent in the good quarters and too specific in a way real markets rarely are. 11.4%, 13.2%. Numbers with decimal precision that felt scientific, when in reality she was just picking plausible sounding figures. Red flag 3. Every time I brought up wanting to pull out a portion, say $15,000 for a kitchen renovation, there was a reason it was a bad time. You'll trigger a redemption penalty inside the lockup period. The fund just made a new capital call. Pulling now would hurt your position. I never once successfully withdrew money without a fight, and every time I talked myself out of pushing harder because, again, this was my sister. Why would I need a lawyer to talk to my own sister about my own money? Red flag 4, and this is the one that should have ended everything in year 1, Vanessa asked me to wire funds not to a fund custodian, not to a brokerage clearing account, but to a personal LLC bank account at a regional bank, an account titled VC Capital Strategies LLC. I looked up VC Capital Strategies LLC exactly 0 times before wiring my first $20,000. I looked it up plenty of times later. It was registered 11 days before I sent that first wire, in Vanessa's name, at a residential address, her own apartment. The moment the money changed hands for real, the moment that mattered, was March 2021. I had just received the last installment of my father's estate, $130,000 on top of what I already had. Vanessa called me on a Sunday, sounding almost reluctant, and said her fund had one more allocation slot in a real estate-backed private credit deal that was closing in 10 days, projected 14 to 16% annual return, and that after this round, she probably wouldn't be able to take on more family capital because the fund was getting close to its cap. Scarcity, urgency, family loyalty, fake exclusivity, all 4 levers pulled at once. I wired $130,000 to VC Capital Strategies LLC on March 22, 2021. Over the following 18 months, between that inheritance money and additional contributions I pulled from my brokerage account because the fund was outperforming everything else I owned, I sent Vanessa a total of 11 wire transfers. Total sent, $341,750. I want to say that number clearly because it's the number the entire rest of this story orbits around. $341,750. Sent in good faith to my sister over 18 months, believing every dollar was compounding in a legitimate private investment vehicle. It wasn't in any vehicle at all. The first crack appeared in September 2022, and it was almost embarrassingly small. My wife and I were finally ready to move forward on a real house, not a condo, and we needed roughly $60,000 for a down payment. I called Vanessa and asked her to process a redemption from the fund. She said sure, no problem, but it would take 30 to 45 days for the redemption cycle, which she'd mentioned before, so I didn't think much of it. 45 days came and went. No wire. I called her. She apologized, said the fund's redemption queue was backed up because of some LP-level liquidity events, and promised the money by the end of the following month. Another month passed. Nothing. By November, I was calling weekly. Her answers got vaguer and more emotional at the same time. She'd say things like, "I'm doing everything I can. Do you know how stressful this is for me? I'm trying to protect everyone's positions." She started framing herself as the victim of market conditions, which, in hindsight, is a very specific and very common tactic. The fraudster becomes the one who needs sympathy. In December 2022, I asked for something simple, a current account statement showing my exact balance and the fund's current holdings. She sent me a PDF. It looked identical in format to every other statement she'd sent for 2 years. Balance $398,412, up from what I'd contributed. On paper, I was a wealthy man. I had $0 I could actually touch. That disconnect is what finally made me suspicious enough to do something I should have done from day one. I called the custodian listed at the bottom of the statement, a real, well-known brokerage firm's name printed in small gray text as the clearing custodian for LP assets. I found their general fraud and compliance line online, not through any number Vanessa had ever given me, and I asked them to verify an account under VC Capital Strategies LLC or under my name. The representative told me politely but clearly that they had no account, no fund, and no record of any relationship with either entity or either name. I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot for 11 minutes before I could make myself drive home. That's the moment. That's the discovery. Not a dramatic confrontation, a customer service representative reading a "no results found" screen back to me over the phone. Let's talk about the scale of the damage because it went far beyond the $341,750. Financial damage. The principal loss was $341,750, but because a large portion of that money came out of a taxable brokerage account where it had been invested in index funds, I also lost approximately 3 years of market growth on that capital. Conservatively, another $61,000 in opportunity cost, based on what the S&P 500 did over that same window. My wife and I had to delay our home purchase entirely. We lost a $4,500 earnest money deposit on a house we could no longer afford to close on because a down payment source had evaporated. Total realistic damage, all in, north of $400,000. Emotional and relational damage. My mother, when I first told her what I'd discovered, did not believe me. She thought I was attacking her golden child out of some long-buried sibling jealousy. That was honestly worse than the money. My aunt had over $90,000 with Vanessa in the same structure. A family friend from church, a widow in her 70s, had put in her husband's life insurance payout, $75,000. I wasn't just uncovering my own theft. I was uncovering a pattern that touched 5 people I loved, one of whom was a woman in her 70s who had trusted my sister at our own family's recommendation. Initial attempts to resolve it and how they failed. I did what most people do first. I tried to handle it privately, within the family. I called Vanessa directly and told her what the custodian had said. She didn't deny it immediately. She pivoted. She said the fund had recently restructured to a different custodian for tax efficiency reasons, and that the old custodian wouldn't have records anymore. It was a plausible sounding lie, and for about 4 days I almost believed it, because believing the lie was so much easier than believing the alternative. I asked for the new custodian's name. She said she'd send it once the paperwork settled. She never sent it. I asked for a full accounting of my funds, every transaction, every trade, every statement of holdings. She sent me a spreadsheet. I noticed on close inspection that several transaction dates fell on a Saturday. Markets are not open on Saturdays. That was a second gut punch detail. Small, almost silly, but it told me everything. She wasn't managing a real fund with real trades. She was building fiction inside a spreadsheet. I gave her one final chance. I told her calmly that I needed my $60,000 wired to me within 2 weeks or I was going to involve a lawyer. She agreed. 2 weeks later, she sent me $8,000, not $60,000, and said it was a partial redemption while the rest processes, along with a message asking me not to escalate this and blow up the family over a timing issue. That $8,000 turned out to be critically important later, and not in the way she intended, but I'll get to that. How she covered her tracks. Once I started asking harder questions, the fabrication became more sophisticated, not less. She began referencing a compliance review at her actual firm that was supposedly unrelated, but was eating up her time. She sent screenshots, not PDFs, screenshots, which are far easier to fake, appearing to show a trading platform with fund holdings in commercial real estate debt instruments. She name-dropped a real, well-known private equity firm as a co-investor, which I later confirmed had no relationship with her or any entity she controlled whatsoever. Most importantly, she started to isolate the information. She asked my aunt not to talk to me about her side of the fund because everyone's redemption timeline is different and it causes confusion when family compares notes. That's a fraud playbook move I now recognize instantly. Keep the victims from comparing timelines because the moment they do, the inconsistencies collapse the whole story at once. By January 2023, I had exactly one piece of hard, undeniable evidence. A bank had confirmed on the record that no account existed. Everything else was still just my word against my sister's inside a family that largely didn't want to believe her capable of this. I needed more than a bad feeling and one phone call. I needed a case. That's when I stopped being a victim and started being an investigator. I want to walk you through exactly how I built this case, step by step, because if you are watching this video wondering whether you have enough to act on, I promise you already have more than you think. You just have to organize it correctly. Step 1. I built a master transaction ledger. I opened a spreadsheet and logged every single wire transfer I had ever sent Vanessa, or VC Capital Strategies LLC, the date, the amount, the sending account, the receiving account number pulled from my bank's wire confirmation records, and the stated purpose from whatever text or email conversation prompted it. This took me a weekend, 11 wires, $341,750. Every single one had a documented paper trail on my end, because banks keep wire confirmation records for years, and I requested certified copies from my own bank going back to 2021. Step 2. I pulled every statement she'd ever sent me and put them in chronological order. This is where the fabrication started falling apart under structure. I noticed the fund's reported total assets under management jumped by suspiciously round numbers right after periods when I know, from my own ledger, that I had just wired new money. In other words, the fund's growth wasn't coming from investment performance. It was coming from new victim deposits. That is, in plain terms, the basic mechanics of a Ponzi structure. New money paying for the appearance of returns on old money. And that's when I found the smoking gun. I cross-referenced the returns she'd shown me against actual market conditions during those same windows. In Q2 2022, when broader markets were down significantly and legitimate private real estate credit funds were reporting flat to negative returns industry-wide, I checked public SEC filings and quarterly reports from several real private credit funds to know what normal looked like. My statement from Vanessa showed a 9.8% gain. There was no legitimate financial instrument on earth generating that number in that asset class in that quarter. It was fiction, and now I had the market data to prove it was fiction. Step 3. I hired a forensic accountant. This is a step most people skip because they think it's only for wealthy people with complicated finances. It is not. I paid a forensic accountant $4,200 for roughly 25 hours of work, and it was the single best financial decision I made in this entire ordeal. She took my wire records, Vanessa's fabricated statements, and public bank records I was able to obtain through subpoena later in the process, and built a clean, court-ready summary showing exactly where my $341,750 went. Here's what the money trail actually showed. Roughly $210,000 went toward Vanessa's personal lifestyle, a leased luxury vehicle, renovations on her condo, 2 overseas vacations documented through credit card statements later obtained in discovery. Approximately $90,000 went to paying returns to earlier family investors, which is the Ponzi mechanic in action. My aunt's monthly distribution checks were coming directly out of my principal. And the remaining roughly $41,000 had gone into a separate personal brokerage account Vanessa controlled, where she had, ironically, made real trades and lost most of it. Step 4. Witnesses. I reached out carefully and privately to my aunts and to the widow from our church. This was one of the hardest conversations of my life because I had to tell 2 people I loved that the woman they trusted with their savings had likely done the same thing to them. Both agreed to share their own statements and wire records with me. Suddenly, I wasn't one victim with a hunch. I was coordinating 3 victims with over $506,000 in combined documented losses. Step 5. Social media and lifestyle evidence. This part felt uncomfortable, almost invasive, but it mattered legally. I compiled a timeline of Vanessa's public Instagram posts, the new car, the remodeled kitchen, a trip to Portugal, and matched the dates against the timeline of wire transfers and redemption delays. Financial investigators and later the prosecutor's office use exactly this kind of lifestyle versus income analysis to establish intent and to counter any claim that the money was simply lost in bad investments. A new luxury vehicle purchased 9 days after a wire clears is not a coincidence a jury ignores. Step 6. I went to a securities fraud attorney. I interviewed 3 attorneys before choosing one who specialized in investment fraud recovery and worked partially on contingency. She reviewed my ledger, the forensic accounting report, and the fabricated statements, and told me within our first meeting, this isn't a family dispute. This is wire fraud, and likely securities fraud because she was soliciting investment in an unregistered, non-existent security using false statements. She helped me draft the formal demand letter and simultaneously helped me prepare a detailed complaint for the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center and for my state's securities regulator, since Vanessa's Series 65 license meant a regulated body had authority over her conduct, even if VC Capital Strategies LLC itself wasn't a registered entity. Within 6 weeks, an FBI financial crimes agent contacted me directly to open a formal file. Case number, redacted for this video, but it was real, it was active, and it changed everything about how seriously my family took this. Here's the moment I almost lost everything, and I want to be honest about it because these stories often skip the part where it nearly falls apart. In February 2023, right as the forensic accounting was being finalized, Vanessa found out, through my mother, who I'd finally convinced to stop talking to her about the case, that I had hired an attorney and a forensic accountant. Within 4 days, she liquidated her personal brokerage account, the one holding that remaining $41,000, and transferred the funds to an account under a different name, her fiancé's business account. She also began telling family members that I was trying to destroy her career over a misunderstanding, and that I was the one being financially reckless, not her. For about 10 days, she also stopped responding to any communication entirely, and my attorney genuinely worried she might attempt to leave the country. She had a valid passport and had traveled internationally twice in the prior year. My attorney moved quickly to file for a civil asset freeze alongside the criminal complaint, specifically requesting a temporary restraining order on any accounts connected to VC Capital Strategies LLC and to Vanessa personally, based on the fabricated statements and the newly discovered transfer to her fiancé's account, which itself looked like an attempt to hide assets. The judge granted an emergency asset freeze on March 3, 2023, 9 days after that fiancé account transfer. If we had been even 2 weeks slower, that $41,000 plus whatever else she might have moved would likely have been gone for good, dispersed into accounts we'd have to fight through additional discovery to even locate. That freeze order was the turning point. From that moment forward, Vanessa's ability to move, hide, or spend was frozen, and the case shifted from will we ever recover anything to how much and how fast. The criminal case moved on a timeline separate from, but connected to, our civil case, and I want to walk through both because most people watching this don't realize you often need to run them in parallel. The criminal charges. Based on the FBI's investigation, which corroborated the forensic accounting almost exactly, Vanessa was indicted on federal charges, including wire fraud and securities fraud, tied specifically to the interstate wire transfers used to solicit and move victim funds under false pretenses. The state's Division of Securities separately pursued charges related to the unregistered offering and her misuse of her Series 65 license, which resulted in her license being permanently revoked before the criminal case even concluded. She initially pled not guilty. Her attorney's defense strategy was essentially that this was a family financial disagreement, that she had intended to generate returns and had simply made poor investment choices, not committed fraud. That defense fell apart almost immediately once the forensic accountant testified about the Saturday trade dates, the fabricated custodian statements, and the direct match between new victim deposits and distribution payments to earlier victims. Textbook evidence of intent, not incompetence. Facing the weight of documented wire fraud across 11 separate transfers, 3 victims, and a paper trail that left no ambiguity, Vanessa accepted a plea agreement in late 2023, guilty to federal wire fraud with sentencing that included prison time, mandatory restitution, and 5 years of supervised release following incarceration, during which she is barred from holding any position involving management of client funds or securities licensure of any kind. The civil recovery. Separately, our civil case resulted in a judgment for the full amount of documented losses across all 3 victims. Combined damages awarded totaled $584,300, covering principal losses, the forensic accounting costs, and pre-judgment interest. Because of that early asset freeze, we were able to recover the $41,000 remaining in the account she tried to move to her fiancé's name, forced liquidation of the leased vehicle's equity, and the sale of jewelry and electronics purchased with stolen funds, totaling roughly $28,000, and a structured restitution payment plan tied directly to wage garnishment once she's released and employed, covering the remaining balance over a mandated 10-year period enforced by the court. As of the most recent restitution report, I have personally recovered $212,000 of my $341,750 in direct returned assets, with the remaining balance under active court-enforced garnishment. My aunt has recovered roughly 61% of her losses so far. And the widow from our church, whose case the prosecutor prioritized given her age and circumstances, was made close to whole through a victim restitution fund the court authorized ahead of the general repayment schedule. The public exposure. Beyond the legal outcomes, the case became part of the public record. Court filings, the plea agreement, and local news coverage of a wealth advisor's sister charged in family investment fraud scheme put Vanessa's name and conduct permanently on the record. Her professional reputation, the one built so carefully over 15 years, is gone. Her Series 65 license revocation is permanent and searchable by anyone who looks her up through FINRA's broker check system. That matters because it means she cannot simply move to a new state and rebuild trust with a new set of victims under a fresh professional license. My own recovery, financial and personal. Rebuilding wasn't just about the money coming back. My wife and I did eventually buy our house, 18 months later than planned, using a combination of recovered restitution funds and rebuilt savings. I changed how I manage money permanently. Every account I hold now has direct portal access I check personally. I use only custodians I've independently verified through FINRA and SEC databases. And I never again invest based on a family relationship alone, no matter how much I love the person asking. My relationship with my mother took nearly 2 years to repair because accepting what her golden child had done meant reevaluating a lot of what she believed about her own judgment. We got there. My relationship with Vanessa, as you'd expect, does not currently exist beyond what the court requires. The twist. Here's the detail that still sits with me more than any dollar figure. During discovery, we learned that Vanessa hadn't started the scheme because she was drowning in debt or facing some desperate emergency. Her financials showed a comfortable, above average income from her legitimate job. The stolen money went overwhelmingly toward maintaining a lifestyle, the car, the renovations, the vacations, that let her keep performing the role of the golden child who had it all figured out. She wasn't stealing to survive. She was stealing to keep up appearances in front of the very family she was stealing from. That's the part that took the longest to sit with. Not the $341,750, the fact that the performance of success was worth more to her than the truth, and worth more than her own family's financial security. If you take one thing from this story, let it be this. The closer someone is to you, the fewer questions you tend to ask. And that is exactly the vulnerability that fraud, family fraud especially, is built to exploit. Here are the warning signs so you can protect yourself and the people you love. 1. If you cannot log into your own account through a real, independently verifiable custodian, you do not actually have transparent access to your money. PDFs and screenshots are not proof of an account. A live login through Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard, or a similarly regulated custodian is. 2. Legitimate investments do not punish you for asking to withdraw your own money. Lockup periods exist in real private funds, but a real fund manager will show you the actual fund documents defining that lockup in writing before you invest, not invent a new excuse every time you ask. 3. Always independently verify a financial professional's licensing through FINRA's broker check and your state's securities regulator. It takes 5 minutes, and it will tell you whether the entity you're wiring money to is actually registered to take it. 4. Watch for returns that are suspiciously smooth and suspiciously specific, especially during periods when broader markets are volatile or down. Real investments have real bad quarters. 5. If a family member asks other family members not to compare notes about their investments with each other, that is not privacy. That is isolation, and it is one of the oldest tricks in the book. And 6, if you ever get that sinking feeling, that quiet, uncomfortable doubt about where your money actually is, trust it. Make the phone call to the custodian. Ask for the license number. Build the ledger. You do not need to accuse anyone of anything to start asking for proof. You just need proof. I got my money back, most of it, with the rest legally guaranteed under a court-enforced restitution order. But more importantly, I got the truth, on the record, permanently. Have you ever been scammed by a stranger, a friend, or someone in your own family? Tell me what happened in the comments. I read every single one, and honestly, some of the best investigations on this channel have started with a comment just like the one you're about to write. If this story meant something to you, subscribe, because there are a lot more of these, and every single one ends the same way this one did, with the truth catching up to them.